Eureka! We're in Eureka, California, on the coast, about 100 miles north of San Francisco. Actually, the airport is called KACV Arcata, Eureka. And we're going to fly today up to Crescent City, which is just a little ways up the coast. By the way, I'm Steve, your host here on Desk-Bound Aviator. Thanks for coming back. We're going to do this little flight up to Crescent City in a most unusual way. I'm going to fly an airplane that I've never flown before a couple of weeks ago. And it's unlike anything else I've flown, as you will see. Let's zoom down and take a look at it. The Bell 429 GlobalRanger helicopter. A friend of mine got into helicopters and inspired me to do the same thing. So we've been trying out all kinds of shareware helicopters. He's actually purchased a couple. I found this one to be a really spectacular model. It's available online at the .org site. I'll leave a link in the description below, so if you're interested, you can check it out. The Bell 429. Beautiful modeling on this thing, and it flies very nicely once you learn how to do it, which took me about 2 weeks of considerable frustration because it's unlike anything you've ever flown if you've never been in a helicopter. And if you have been in a helicopter and you are a helicopter pilot, you may find this video a little bit too basic for you because this is strictly newbieville. But I've learned a little bit and I've gotten to the point where I can actually fly this thing. So I thought I'd take a crack at doing a video and sharing it with my friends here on Desk-Bound Aviator. So let's hop inside. Whoops, wrong key. We'll go there in the back. Bunch of seats back here. If we move the cursor so it turns into a hand, we can close these doors. And then we'll jump up in the cockpit, close that door. Pilot in the helicopter sits on the right. And one of the things that I'm doing that's a little bit different than most X-plane helicopter pilots is I don't have a joystick. And I don't have pedals. So what I'm using here is my CH Eclipse yoke. And I've mapped various things to substitute for what you would normally do with a joystick. For example, this device right here, this is called a cyclic. It kind of makes the helicopter go left and right, forward and back, and tilts the whole angle of the rotor. So that's the cyclic, and for the cyclic, I'm using my yoke. So if I turn my yoke that way, the cyclic goes back and forth. If I push it and pull it back and forth, it does that. And I can kind of make it go on angles just by turning it. So it works pretty well as a substitute joystick. Of course, you got to make sure it's calibrated properly. I hope it is. And over here, you've got the collective. And I have a lever here on my yoke that allows me to operate the collective. And on the collective, you have a throttle control, which I can do with another lever on my yoke. And I'm going to turn the throttle down to its low idle position so we can get things started. And to do that, what we'll do is move down here to the center console, and I'll first turn the batteries on. And that fires up some of the electric controls. Turn that blinking light off with the caution button. Let's see, what else? I'm going to go ahead and turn on the fuel pump switches so that when we get cranked up, it'll pump fuel into the engines. I'll scroll down here and turn on the position light, strobe light, and the anti-collision light. Those three lights can go on. And leave the generators off for the time being until we start. The last thing I'm going to do is take a look up here at the ceiling. There's a light up here you can use at night if you want to illuminate the cockpit. We don't need it today. It's a bright sunny day here in California. But I'm going to take this lever here. This is your rotor brake lever, and right now it's engaged, so the rotor is stationary. I'm going to move it up here to the ceiling like so, and that way when we start the engines, the rotors are free to rotate. All right, we'll come back down here, and we can see the upper glare shield panel. It's got a bunch of switches here for testing and fire situations, engine control, automatic buttons. This allows you to brighten up the instrument lights, which I've done before. But these two switches here are the most important ones right now. They're the run switches for the engine. All you need to do to start this thing is just turn those two switches up. And we'll start with engine number 1 by just flipping this toggle switch to the left position, to the start position. And you can see it's starting to rev up the engines. That green pointer or indicator will jump up here to the 8 or 9 position and come back down to about 5 1/4. And you can see that by the shadows that the rotor is starting to spin. When that gets up to a decent level, we'll go ahead and turn on the number 1 generator. Oops, just by flipping that switch up. That fires up the lower Garmin unit and also the PFD over here. This is the 430, I believe, and this is the Garmin 530, standard fare for X-Plane. I've seen models of this with a different GPS system, and I'm not sure where to get them. It might just be a PC thing. I'm on a Mac, so I'm always limited in some of the things that I can get that PC folks can enjoy. I can't. So now that engine 1 is started, we'll go ahead and just flip this switch the other way. See that it'll fire up the engine again in a similar fashion. This outline version of that pointer comes up about 9 1/4 and comes back down to about, what's that? 6 1/4. And the switch comes back automatically. When it does, you can go ahead and fire up generator number 2. All the systems are ramping themselves up nicely. And now what we'll do is take that throttle, and I'm going to rotate that, or I'm going to advance my throttle on my yoke, and you'll see this pointer down here is going to rotate up as the throttle comes up. You may hear a little momentary alarm there, which is no problem. Turn the caution light out. And the last thing I'm going to do is arm the autopilot system by pushing these 2 buttons and trim. Turn the trim, automatic trim button on. And you'll see down here that lower button that says SCAS. That's your stabilization mode. That allows the aircraft to be stable. Without that, you can still fly the helicopter, but it's just not as stable and smooth. So that's why you leave that on. If you hit this button to the lower section, then you're on autopilot. So now let's get the autopilot set up. And the first thing I'm going to do that, there's a button over here that's called ADC. And there are 2 settings here. When it's on white, this is called the auto data controller, I believe, or something like that. And when it's white, it is set for the co-pilot, and when it's green, it is set for the pilot. And you'll notice this number here, the barometric pressure will change to what it is locally when I press this button. It doesn't change. It says 3023. That's interesting, because the barometric pressure right here in our kta Eureka is 3006, I believe. So I've got the green barrel button down here set. I'm going to rotate this dial and see what happens. I'm looking at two things. One is the altimeter right here, which is curious because in this aircraft this number doesn't work, but this number right here does. And you should see some change here as well. So let's rotate this. There, you can see how I'm dialing that down, and both numbers are changing. I'm going to go to 3006, and there it is indicated here as well. So that works. So now that I've set our barometric pressure properly, we can go ahead and set the target altitude. Now the target altitude is displayed right here, and it's a very curious system that they use. This button here is set to control the target altitude, so I'll press that so that that's green. We come off baro setting. So now when I rotate this dial, it's not going to change my barometric setting, it's going to change my target altitude. Our target altitude today is going to be 3,500 feet. So the first thing I want to do is move this little white dot, which you see here. Disregard that 79 knots, that's just kind of a bug, as I understand it. I'm going to move that dot by pressing this button right here, this dial, over to the units position. Now if I rotate that, I can change that to a 0. Now I'm going to move up to the thousands position, and I'm going to change that to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Then if I click over to the hundreds position, I can change that to 3,500. And I'm going to use 3,500 as our operating altitude today. We'll see if that works, because we may find that it doesn't, that there are hills in the way. So if there are, we'll have to deal with that when the time comes. Next thing I want to do is to establish our rate of climb. That's indicated by this VS indicator right here, vertical display, vertical speed display, VS. And you see this little red or magenta marker right in the center there. I'm going to come out here, oops, this way. Keep your eye there, and I'm going to then come down here to this hat switch on the collective. When I put my mouse over that hat switch, it changes into 4 arrows, up, down, left, and right. If I use the up arrow, and you watch that little red mark, see it goes up to, should be right at the thousands mark. There we are, 1,000 feet per minute is what that now indicates. So we've got that established. This dial here indicates our ground speed, and right now it's set for 80 knots. So I'll go ahead and ramp that up a bit to 100 knots. And to do that, likewise, I come back here to the collective, and it's the left and right arrow this time. I'm going to take the right arrow and watch that little dot as it rotates around and comes up to the 100 mark. Maybe that's 101. Let's go back 1. Good. Now maybe that's 99. All right. Let's just pop it one more time in that direction. Okay, close enough. Maybe it's 101. Not right on the button, but close enough. Okay, so that takes care of our airspeed. Now the last thing I want to do is to set our heading to be in the direction that we're going right now. And to do that, I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to go to that view so that you can watch that little blue indicator. And I'm going to come down here to the corresponding blue indicator on this heading bug or dial. And all I have to do is tap it, and that moves the heading indicator to the top of the compass. So now our heading is aligned. I do all of that so that after we take off and we've established ourselves comfortably in flight, then I'll go ahead and tap the button right here. Again, this SCAS button, or the stabilization button, and go from stabilization mode into autopilot mode. And what that will do is it'll set the aircraft on a climb rate of 1,000 feet toward 3,500 feet altitude in the direction of our heading bug, which is the direction of the runway. Once we've accomplished all of that, we then may come over and switch to, let me just figure out where I want to go here. Yeah. We may come over here then and switch from heading mode to nav mode, and that will put us on our GPS line. And I'll come up here and make sure that we're on GPS, and we are. And so that'll put us on our GPS line headed toward Crescent City. And that's basically how it works. It's a little complicated to learn, and you have to kind of study it a bit, look at a lot of videos, but that's how the system works. And there's a lot more features to it that I don't understand, that I haven't gotten to yet. But I think that'll enable us to get to Crescent City. So, having done all of that, let's just check everything else out. Doors are closed. Come in here a little bit. We've got our engines running smoothly. Now, one thing I want to show you, and this is kind of like Helicopter 101. Let's just pop outside here for a bit. And you can see our rotors are spinning merrily away. We just come up a little bit. You can see that the plane of the rotors is not exactly horizontal. So if we were to pull the collective right now and raise up, we would not go straight up in the air. We would go forward considerably at some considerable speed. And so in order to compensate for that, what I need to do is to pull the collective back a bit and just tilt the nose up. See how that changes our angle a little bit? Then as I'm sorry, that's the cyclic I'm talking about, the cyclic. And then when I pull the collective up and we start to elevate, we start to raise up the helicopter into the air, it will tend to go straight up or slightly forward, but not so much. And that's how we control the takeoff. So again, it's a combination of controlling the helicopter with the cyclic and raising the collective very, very gently, very simply. So I'm going to do all of this and probably not speak too much because there's too much stuff going on. I've got my throttle full, got everything set, and hopefully it's all going to work. So first we pull the nose up just a little bit. Now I'm just inching my collective lever upward. And there we go, forward and up into the air. Not too bad. Now that we've accomplished that, I'm pushing my yoke,
100.
but really I'm pushing the cyclic forward a little bit to get ourselves some forward motion. And I'm using the paddles on my yoke as my rudder. Now most people would have a joystick and pedals on the floor that they would use for their rudder. I use paddles that are on my CH yoke. So there we go. We're off on our way north up the coastline. Now let's go ahead and flip on the autopilot button. And as you can see, that starts to establish our climb, and it puts us at our speed of 100 knots. Let me just zoom in a little closer. So we're settling back down to 100 knots. We're climbing nicely toward 3,500 feet. And what I will do, first of all, get my proper view, I'm going to go ahead and put on Alt-S. Now, that didn't do anything. You have to have altitude set first, and then Altitude S will allow you to modify it. Now, as we approach 3,500, this will keep climbing right through that unless I press the altitude button. So I'm going to, let me just make sure we're headed in the right direction here. Yeah, we're going a little bit off course. So I'm going to rotate the heading bug. Actually, what I'm going to do is go ahead and hit the nav mode. Now that will bring us back toward our course. And we're probably now past 3,500, and I'm going to go ahead and hit altitude. Let's see what that did. That should settle us right in. Now, it's still climbing.
Altitude.
All right, so let me, what's it climbing to? It's climbing to 4,000. I'm not sure why. It's still a mystery to me, some of the things that it does. So we've got our speed established. We've settled in at 4,100 feet. Let's see if we can get it back down to 35. I'm changing the, somehow this number changed here and it shouldn't have done that. Anyway, we are headed in the right direction. We're at altitude. We're doing fine. So I'm going to dial this number down, but first I want to put that cursor in the right position. I'm going to make this a 0. There's 36. So we'll make that 35. Now we'll come over here, and you see it says VSALT. If I go to my VS gauge, if I come back here, now I can establish my descent rate by lowering that red line. And the green indicator tells me what mode I'm in. So what we're doing now is we're in VS mode, which is vertical speed, and we've set the vertical speed at about 800 feet per minute. And we are descending. Now, shortly you will hear the annunciator say altitude. And you'll see this change from green VS to green ALT.
Altitude.
There we go. And this will continue on down to 3,500 feet and stop. And it slows down. You can see the vertical speed is gradually reaching the center line as the helicopter slows down its rate of descent. And it will now fly at 3,500 feet. So it was a little confusing there, just getting started, why that went beyond. And it's because I'm not really clear yet on how to stop the ascent, how to get the VS-ALT system operating properly like we just did. In the initial climb, I simply set the altitude, but I didn't have that VS-ALT combination set, so the helicopter just flew on by our 3,500 ceiling. And it's a little confusing still. I'm learning. And I'm sure you're comfortable sitting there knowing that your helicopter pilot is learning how to do this while you're enjoying the ride. You know, it is what it is, folks. This is XPlane. All right, so here we are flying over Northern California. A lovely day. Take a look around. I think I see something that, oh no, I guess not. Zoom out a little bit. Beautiful machine. Pilot. Yeah, there it is. Terrific. So we're going to be flying along here on our route up to Crescent City. Zoom out a little bit, be able to see the whole line. I'm going to make a turn here at S51, which is an airport, probably up here by this bend in the coastline. And then we'll come into KCEC. Now, when we do that, there are ways you can use ILS with this system. You can do automatic controlled descents down to hover, none of which I understand. Or that I have done yet. So what I'm going to do is I do understand how to just descend using the controls that we've just discussed. And I'll do a little bit of that. And then I'll just take over control of the helicopter and hope for the best. And hope I can get this thing to land properly so that I can complete this video. So as you can tell, this is a learning experience for me. I will come back to you in a little bit as we get closer to Crescent City and have a lot of fun. Okay, we're about 10 miles out from our destination here at Crescent City, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off various elements of autopilot, starting with altitude. Got the speed turned off. There goes altitude. So now we are controlling the altitude, and then I'm going to do the FMS, or the nav mode. Turn that off. So we should now be okay. The altitude is the last one. Let's see. Let's see if we can. Yeah, I'm still not getting control of the aircraft. So that's because it's on autopilot. So now that we've got it off autopilot, I can start to control the aircraft manually, which I am now doing. And I can see our speed is coming down. And as I decrease the collective, we start to make a descent. Okay, as we come in here, what I'm going to try to do, make a slow descent. And the first thing I want to do is slow the aircraft down just a little bit by pulling the nose up. And then we'll make our way over toward the runway, descending ever so slowly as we do that. So right now our speed is about 30, and the altitude is just lowering down from about 800. Now we're approaching 7. Just see if we can keep it right in there. Maintaining the forward speed. Now, here's where it gets tricky when you get down to this altitude. It tends to want to drop. So I got to keep the nose down, keep some speed. And bring the collective up. Otherwise, we'll drop like a stone. That looks pretty good right there. The speed's nice. Just bring it around. Now we can drop a little more.
Check height. Check height. $100.
There we go. Kind of skidding more than hovering. All right, how's that? All right, let's see if we can shut this down. Now, the first thing we need to do is rotate our throttle down to low idle. You get an alarm when you do that. And then we can come up here and turn off the engine switches. And while that's settling itself down, we can turn off the fuel pumps and the generators. TCAS switch can go off. Let's see what the alarms are. Probably going to see an indication that we can put the rotor brake on. And that'll stop the rotor from spinning. You have to wait until the rotor gets to 40 or below in order to do that. And now the rotor's stopped. Turn that caution light off. Make sure our lights are off. Let's see, down here, that's right, there we go. Defogment blower can go off. And that's about it. Last thing we need to do is turn the battery off. Last look around, open the door. pop out. And there we are. The Bell 429. Very nice machine. Very nice machine indeed. So thanks for joining me today on that exciting trip. A little bit dicey landing and some of the episodes in it, but we managed to make it on the ground in one piece. Major accomplishment. This thing takes quite a learning curve, believe me. It's very skittish, but this is a very smooth model. I've flown a few other freeware, shareware helicopters, and I find this one to be about the smoothest. The Sikorsky is also smooth, but I like the controls in this better. So thanks for joining me today. This is Steve, your desk-bound aviator. I will see you soon, maybe in a helicopter. Who knows? Have a good day.